This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me, our Locked On Falcons host, Aaron Freeman, Locked On analyst, Jarvis Davis, and 11 Alive anchor, Maria Martin. The Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So who has to hit the ground running on September 7th? We'll discuss. And how do the Falcons make a top 10 ranking? Paid dividends. We'll download on that also. Bounce back on special teams in 2025. We'll explain. But first, let's talk about Kirko's commentary on Quarterback. The show Quarterback debuted on Netflix this week with the spotlight on Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, and Kirk Cousins. In the show, Kirk said he felt, quote, misled by the Falcons when they drafted Michael Penix Jr. So obviously we've had a lot of commentary on this topic, Jarvis, and we've had pieces of feedback here and there, thinking back to mandatory minicamp when Kirk had an opportunity to speak, but ultimately it just keeps coming back and rearing its head in different iterations, this time, of course, because of the debut of that show. So we'll talk about it again. But looking back at it and thinking about how anyone would feel if you got the deal Kirko got to come here and be sort of the QB savior for this team, only for this franchise to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and get your backup or get your replacement now as well. I mean, did he have a right to feel like, hey, he was misled or feel some type of way about how that situation played out?
I think he had a right to feel some insecurity, right? Because that was the reason why he left the Vikings, because he didn't want to deal with the whole quarterback in waiting and all that stuff. And year to year, how he explained it on the actual series. But I think overall, you do have to have some type of self-awareness, because you're not Tom Brady, and you're not going to play until you're 40 and be a quote-unquote Super Bowl fixer type quarterback. And he's never been that. So I think it could boil down to him having to understand that, like, this team, you understand where they were coming from. I understand his feelings as far as not wanting to have a guy breathing down your neck and all that stuff, but you got to understand where the Falcons coming from too. They hadn't had jack worth talking about as a quarterback position since Matt Ryan walked. They traded away Matt Ryan after they failed in pursuit of Deshaun Watson. So I think all of those things, I think everybody was everybody's feelings were hurt. Both sides were hurt. Just like, hey man, we trying to protect ourselves. Like, and I think that, Kurt felt the way he felt, and the Falcons felt the way they felt too. They were like, all right, yeah, we're giving you this money. You're going to be our guy for at least the next 2 years. I know contractually it was 4 years, but it kind of worked out to where 2 years, it made sense for the Falcons there. And then they have their guy, but the Falcons refused to be in a situation where they desperate enough to go after a guy that had $1 million sexual civil cases against him. Like, so I think it was just big feelings and everybody trying to protect themselves from a mental standpoint. Hey man, I ain't trying to get hurt again. And I understand it.
Yeah. So Maria, Jarvis makes a great point when you look back at the starting point of it, which was the signing of the 4-year, $180 million deal, $50 million signing bonus, $100 million guaranteed, 2 years looking like they were in the bank, for lack of a better term. So if you're Kirk Cousins, you're feeling like, hey, that is so much more of a guarantee than what Minnesota was willing to do for him. And then all of a sudden, Michael Penix Jr. happens. And you're thinking to yourself as Kirk Cousins, wow, I do feel some type of way, because is this not what I was trying to walk away from? And it seems like I'm walking into that. But then, like Jarvis said, you have to look at it from the Falcons' perspective as well. We know the mids that they had at QB for the 2 years preceding Kirk Cousins and languishing in their own division. So you're there and you see that guy available, you can understand how they would say, hey, if looking at the QB class of 24 and looking at the QB class of 25, we think we got a guy in 24 and we just can't pass him up. But nonetheless, Maria, you're allowed to feel what you feel. Kirk felt what he felt.
Yeah, and none of this is new information, right? We knew that he was frustrated on the night of the draft. So we've known this for a long time. It's just the fact that quarterback has now come out. And remember, this has been taped forever ago. So this was fresh feelings when they're asking him these questions, however many months ago they asked him those questions. Nothing that he said was new. Although the one thing I thought he said within the misled quote that I thought was my biggest takeaway was kind of something you were getting at, Tenitra. He said, why would I leave Minnesota, a place that my family is at? We live here. We've been here for a long time, to go to a franchise that's simply going to do the exact same thing that Minnesota had planned to do. I understand it from that point. And he thought that he was getting longevity out of the Falcons, which, again, to your point, Minnesota was not willing to do that. They were only willing to go year to year with Kirk. And so for him, it's let me move my family and all of us to a situation where we can get a couple more years out of this thing. I understand it. I also understand the Falcons' point where I don't believe that it was their grand plan all along to draft Michael Penix Jr. I think they fell in love with the player during the draft process. And when he's available and he's sitting there, you're having a quick conversation in that room of, how do we pass on this guy? Even though this is probably going to be looked at as one of the riskier moves in the draft, how do we pass on him when we know we don't love any of the quarterbacks in the 25 class? There's someone that we're obsessed with. He's sitting there. Let's take him. So, yeah, I think it caught probably the Falcons by surprise just as much as it did Kirk. So that's something that's really important to remember. And I don't think anything that Kirk said within that misled quote is wrong. I think that he is very valid in feeling the way that he wants to feel. He was misled, but it's not like it was their plan, or at least I don't think so.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Maria. I think everything that we've heard since the draft has actually confirmed for us that no, this was not some grand scheme like, yeah, we're going to get Kirk Cousins, but we're going after a quarterback as well. It's just, again, you do your vetting, you do your scouting. There are people on your draft board, and oh my goodness, that guy seems like he might still be there. You'd be remiss if you didn't take him. And I think that really is how that happened. But I say, Maria, and this is just kind of commentary, if you will, not so much facts, but you got to think too, that lingered for Kirk Cousins all season long, looking over his shoulder because, and I have thoughts about how the Falcons handled Kirk's phantom injuries, but from Kirk's perspective, it does make you look over your shoulder, maybe makes you try a little bit harder than maybe you otherwise would have, because now you've got pressure virtually from day one to perform because MPX is there in the building. And then even when your body starts to give out on you towards the end of the season, you're going to try your darndest to say, hey, no, I'm really good. I'm really good. I can go back. I can trot myself back out there, because you're thinking about the fact that you don't want to give up your job.
Yeah, I think this is the part that has a lot of fans up in arms. This was later on in the documentary. I've now finished it. Phenomenal, by the way. I'm so interested in the quarterback series. To be honest, I was a little bit more interested in the other two just because I knew what happened with what played out with Kirk.
Yeah.
But I think this is what has people really frustrated, is that he talks about the Saints game and when he got hit in the elbow and he knew he wasn't right, he tried to fight through it. And he even mentioned he took a page from Drew Brees' book where Drew said, never let your backup see the field, no matter what. And that was the thought in his head when he knows, I'm already under pressure because of the way the Falcons had handled things. I have to perform. Otherwise, I'm going to get benched for the first time in 10 years. He hasn't been a backup quarterback in 10 years. So this is unfamiliar territory for Kirk, who, as we all know, is towards the back end of his career, certainly. And he needs to be a starter if he wants to continue playing for a long time. And you also have a backup that is no slouch, right? He's a first-round draft pick. And you know what you have in Michael Penix Jr. And I think that was illustrated so beautifully by Kirk's behind the scenes, because the first day that they trot out there and MPX is taking QB1 reps, Kirk very subtly is going, that's really good throw. That's not bad. He knows. Once he sees it, he understands, okay, I think this is it for me. And so you're going to try everything that you can in order to continue to play. I'm not justifying what he did. I'm not saying it was right, but I think many other players in his scenario probably would have done the same thing. Like, oh, I got it. Even though I don't feel I have the zip and the oomph on the ball, I'm going to try to create situations to try to get the ball there in order to make it seem like I'm okay. So I think it has fans really frustrated. They're calling him selfish and all these things, but just the conglomerate of everything that happened, the way that the Falcons handled it, the way that Kirk was in this situation in the first place, there was no doubt in my mind he was going to try to push through anything and everything to see the field.
Exactly. And sometimes I think that we don't give enough culpability to the Falcons because at the end of the day, the eye test was showing the average person that something wasn't quite right. So regardless of what Kirk Cousins is telling you and saying, what he's doing on the field speaks volumes about what's not quite right. And I think that's sometimes why fans and even media kind of scratch their heads about why it took so long for the Falcons to kind of transition to Michael Penix Jr. Of course, we know there are different layers to it, but I think there's culpability that can go all the way around from a training staff to a front office to the quarterback himself. But that said, Aaron, also it made me think about something that Hugh Douglas used to say all the time, one of our dear friends from our old days at 92.9. He knew the minute the Eagles drafted his replacement, he felt the pressure. And so that is not a Kirk Cousins thing, as Maria mentioned. That's a thing that even a layman can say if you have, an intern or you're the manager and the company hires an assistant manager. You kind of know sometimes when your days are seriously numbered. And I think that's kind of a driving force, no matter how we might feel about it, for Kirk to kind of feel a type of way. And then on top of that, feel like he was misled in coming here relative to where he was coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it boils down to. The Vikings were very upfront with the idea that, hey, we're going to draft the quarterback high. And yes, Kirk, we are going to quote unquote commit to you in 2024. But Kirk understood that if they took a quarterback high, that the writing would be on the wall. And so him coming to Atlanta and, negotiating 2 years of guarantees was sort of his way of securing, you can't trust the team. Like the Falcons, not to say that the Falcons made promises that they weren't, the Falcons probably didn't say anything, but the idea was like, I need to put it in writing that you're not going to do what the Vikings are going to do by giving me 2 years of guaranteed money. Like no one held a gun to the Falcons' head and said you had to give Kirk $180 million over 4 years and $100 million in guaranteed money over those 2 years. And so like, that's not on Kirk to basically say, well, I need to take a pay cut for the benefit of the Atlanta Falcons. I need to get mine. Like, anybody on this planet in that situation would have done what he did. And so Kirk thought, within his agent, with their negotiation, was like, okay, we've given ourselves security. And the Falcons were like, nah, you don't have that security. And so I think ultimately what Kirk is saying and what Maria is right. Like we knew this when he was asked after the draft, where like, would you change your decision had you known what the Falcons were going to do? And he said the very correct thing that he needed to say at the time. You can't dwell on the past. We're just moving forward. You only can control what you go. But we all knew that, yes, the answer was if he had known what he knows now, that he would have just stayed in Minnesota. And like, I don't fault Kirk at all, because that probably would have been a smart play. And it certainly probably would have benefited the Atlanta Falcons by not paying all this money. And when we talk about, the late season injury against the Saints and why it took so long, we talked about it back in early December. The reason why the Falcons kept, riding with Kirk is because they paid him all this money and they needed to get a return on their investment. So I think when I see fans and media sort of acting like Kirk single-handedly tanked the Falcon season, what tanked the Falcon season was giving that money to Kirk Cousins. And it was basically why so many people were critical of the Michael Penix pick, because it basically, yes, you took 2 shots at getting a quarterback, and so therefore you increase the odds that you hit on one of those things. But by taking those 2 shots and investing that amount of resources, giving the $100 million in guarantee to Kirk Cousins and using the first-round pick on Michael Penix, it's like you can't do both. You can't hit on both. There's no way to walk that tightrope. And so basically, if you're going to hit on Michael Penix as the first-round pick, and as we sit here today, that seems to be the path that the Falcons are hopefully on, you basically pissed away $100 million for no reason that you didn't necessarily need to do, because Kirk is basically saying that had, the situation been, had you been upfront and forthcoming or whatever, that I wouldn't have come here. And you made this bet, the Atlanta Falcons. That's not Kirk Cousins. Or if you hit on Kirk Cousins, then you just wasted a first-round pick on Michael Penix. Either way, like the Falcons deserve a lot more criticism for how this went, as opposed to trying to point the finger at Kirk Cousins and act like he's the villain of the story. He's not the victim by any means. He's not the hero by any means, but I don't think anybody should be sitting here and acting like Kirk's in the wrong for feeling some type of way, because to me, this is a bet of the Falcons' own making. Like they did this to themselves. They either torpedoed that $100 million that they gave to Kirk Cousins, or they torpedoed a draft pick. They didn't have to do both. But as Maria said, I think when they were sitting there in early March deciding on, they didn't know if they were going to get Michael Penix. They wanted Michael Penix. We heard that he was number 2 on their board after Jaden Daniels, but there were 5 teams ahead of them that needed quarterbacks, and they sat there at 8. We're not guaranteed to get Michael Penix, so we need to do what's in our best interest now, secure the quarterback position with Kirk Cousins, and maybe if things work out the way we want, we'll still get the guy that we want in the draft. They got it. And now we're in this situation where, we spent the last 6 months talking about Kirk Cousins and all this stuff. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I agree with you, Aaron. I think that there is enough blame to go around, and I think that Kirk Cousins does have the right to feel some type of way. One of our viewers said, well, everyone on the team feels that way because everyone has a backup. True. Or they are one backup away from losing their job. Not true. Do your job and you have no worries. Most players are not in a position where they're literally brought in to save the team, or drafted to save the team, or they are first string to save the team. A quarterback is different.
Yeah,
that
job is totally different.
Exactly. So I can't agree with that as far as every backup is equal. No, not every backup situation is equal. When you're talking QB1 versus QB2 versus, say, safety 1 versus safety 2, that's just a little bit different. And I think, too, going back to what Aaron said as well with the Falcons, where my mind went? It went to, there is culpability. And the reason everyone was up in arms and saying, Falcons, how could you do this with $100 million and a number 8 pick? Because when I think about Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes, that's a different situation, because Alex Smith ain't getting paid $100 million, and he's not brought in that season. And then you turn around and you draft a Patrick Mahomes. Alex Smith was in a much tougher injury situation that he had experienced. And then my mind went to, so Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes was like right at the top of my mind. Oh, Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Like, there are situations where backups are in place, or there's a quarterback who's a true QB1 who's in place, and then there's a backup that's right there. But it's the fact that the stakes were high on both ends. The stakes were high with the money, and the stakes were high with the draft pick. And that's why this conversation, to you guys' point, is still happening ad nauseum 6 months later. But there are other rookies. There are rookies in the 2025 class, rather, who absolutely will have some things on top of them, some real big expectations. Who's going to hit the ground running? We'll take that under further review. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach, and God knows it's hot enough to get just that. It's easy to use, it's fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. So whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the 9th inning, as long as it's not the Braves, as Jarvis will tell you, FanDuel makes it feel like you're a part of the action. So are you new to FanDuel? Well, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, new customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open that FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Maria, we are T-minus 59 days to the start of the Falcons' regular season. Big games to start the season, including games against the Bucs in the season home opener, also with the Vikings, the Commanders, the Bills. So for you, which rookie do you think has to be counted on or will have to be counted on to make an early impact?
How are we 50 something days away from the start of the season? I don't know where time is going. It's literally insane. But I think it's going to be James Pierce Jr. The reason why I say that is very similar to kind of the situations that we're talking about with the quarterback. When you draft someone in a certain position, there are certain expectations that come out of it, right? And we've talked about this before, especially on this podcast, that James Pierce Jr. being the second of 2 first-round picks for the Falcons this year, he's got to deliver. And not only that, there was somewhat of a risk that came along with it just because of those pre-draft scouting reports, which we all know now. A lot of his players, his new teammates have said, like, what character issues are you talking about? This guy's amazing. This guy's so bought in. He's the best. And just the way that the coaches talk about James Pierce Jr. so early, they have so much belief that this is a guy that can be versatile, but also can be excellent at his craft. And that was such a depleted position for the Falcons, dating back to whoever knows. It's been so long. We've been talking about this for years and years and years. You draft somebody to come in and make an impact. He is someone you're going to expect to do that. He's long, he's lengthy. He should get after the quarterback. That's what you drafted him to do. I'm relying on him a lot this year.
Yeah. And what about for you, Jarvis, when you kind of look at the rookie who for you has to be counted on to make that early impact, who would it be?
Oh gosh, for me, I totally agree with Maria. Just from a pressure standpoint, or they have to get it right. Hey, our front office knows what we're doing.
Yeah,
Blank them picks, like all that stuff. Yeah, I get it for the James Pierce Jr. piece, but for me, and I think I'm guilty of this, it's almost kind of like an assumption that Jalen Walker is going to do his thing. I think there's still that pressure there because when you look at the Carolina Panthers and them passing on them, because everybody and their mama had them sitting right there. Jalen Walker is going to Carolina. He's going to Carolina. They need to add defense. And then they go with Ted McMillan. So all those things kind of boil down to, okay, you fell down in the draft. And I think personally, Jalen Walker is going to put some pressure on himself to be able to perform because he wants to prove that, hey, y'all should have taken me. And I think that Jalen Walker is that guy because people kind of move their attention away from him. Like, oh yeah, he's gonna be good. He's all right. He's a dog, first round talent. Nobody had any issues with him taking him at 8, right? Oh, you failed it, you gotta take it. The best player available, blah, 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 all that stuff. But I think that there's still pressure that comes with that because people are assuming that you're going to perform. And I think that I believe he's going to perform because I think he has all the tools, but there is something that goes with when you're talking about having to perform because of the putrid pass rush that you've had for the past decade.
What an adjective.
Well, I try from time to time.
That's great.
I read in college sometimes.
Let's not go down that road.
You make Aaron laugh out loud.
Why you laughing at the boy? You agree?
That was a perfect response, bro. That was a perfect response. I'm sorry. For me, it is James Pierce, I think. Just because of all the things that Maria said, but as Jarvis laid out, like it's pressure on both of these pass rushers. The Falcons, going back to what we were just talking about, like they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves. Like, hey, we know what we're doing, and we're taking 2 swings, and instead of only hitting on one of these at the quarterback position, we're going to hit on both of these guys as a pass rusher. But I do think because of a lot of the reasons that Maria pointed out, because the Falcons traded up in the draft, because I think the general perception was for a lot of people stemming from going into last season that James Pierce Jr. was the top pass rusher available. And then, for all the reasons that Maria talked about, his draft stock fell from a potential lock as a top 5 pick when you go back and look at all the various mock drafts from this time last year. And again, you can do certain things with those mock drafts on a piece of paper in a bathroom or whatever you want to say when it comes to that stuff. But at the same time, the perception is that James Pierce Jr. is a high caliber player. And, now with the recent news that Tristan Wirfs is probably going to miss that week 1 game, it puts even more pressure. It's like, oh, you get a backup now. And so early in that season, day one for both of these young pass rushers, hey, we expect you to go out there and make a name for yourself in week one. And then when you're facing the Christian Darasaws and the Trent Williamses and the Deion Dawkins and so many other high-level offensive tackles at the beginning of the season, as we've discussed many times on this show, with the sort of toughness of those first 6 or so games for the Falcons schedule, you definitely need those guys to come through and show, hey, I'm not just going to go out there and beat a bunch of backups, hopefully in week one against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I also can beat some of the high-level offensive tackles in the league. And with where this defense is headed, so much I think of their success this upcoming season is going to rely on their ability to get a lot of these good, talented quarterbacks that they're going to face throughout the season on the ground from a defensive standpoint. And so I think that puts pressure on both of these young pass rushers, but I do think for all the reasons that Maria mentioned, there's just a little bit more added scrutiny on James Pierce Jr.
Yeah. And Maria, I will, before I ask if there are any others, I'll just say, I'll use an off the beaten path example, right? Because I think the class of 2024 has a lot of need for impact. Everyone from Michael Penix Jr., who just showed us 3 games, to Braylon Trice, what are you actually going to be? So I'll just throw the whole rookie class of 2024 in there pretty much, because I think they're still sort of for the most part, if we look at them in totality, kind of a TBD sort of class that I feel like they need to show us exactly what they are made of and what they can do. But also, when you look at this rookie class from 2025, and Maria, I'll throw in 2024 as well and say, hey, who do you see as maybe a starter in that game one against the Buccaneers, who can actually kind of the cream rises to the top, or if they're not starters, have kind of starting type reps, like the number of snaps that they're able to get in that first game so that we can see them make an impact.
Well, if you're going to throw in 2024, can I say Michael Penix Jr. and just
right? That's why I said in its totality, Maria. That's exactly why
I do that and just be correct.
Agreed.
Somebody taking it easy today.
I'm kidding.
No, but I'm not kidding, because that class, it still feels like they're one of the most. I think there's a bigger question mark around that class than maybe we've seen in recent memory, because I think you can look back at Terry Fontenot's other classes and at least have 1, 2, or 3 players with which you can evaluate their impact from game one of their first season.
No, you're right. I mean, you're 100% right. And especially because obviously the defense has transformed so much and it looks so different that you kind of don't really know who's going to trot out there in game one. When I saw this question on a rundown, I was like, oh, I can't wait to get to training camp, because I might be able to start answering these questions, because you see a little bit more from these guys. But for me, and I don't believe that this is the easy route, though it may be looked at as that, I think it's Jalen Walker. And it's not because I don't think he's a guarantee, whatever. I know, Jarvis, you were talking about he's being overlooked a little bit just because everyone thinks so highly of him. I don't necessarily know that that's true, just because especially the edge defenders do look so different. They've gone through this metamorphosis. This is a group that is going to be so focused on in training camp. And that's why I was like, dang it, I can't wait to get to training camp, because who knows what that group of guys is going to look like. Although I do know when you are taken in the first round as an edge guy, specifically a depleted position, a putrid position, is that what you called it?
Yes.
When you're taken in the first round, especially first, so going with Jalen, not James Pierce Jr., going with Jalen, the expectation is for you to start. It is, we need help, and we need you to help us right now. And so for me, I would fully expect Jalen to be one of those guys. And it also comes with, similar to James Pierce Jr., the high praise that from the top down people have given for Jalen from the very beginning. So before they even saw him in practice on the football field, granted, we were in shorts so far, so they're not doing anything crazy, but still, even after those practices, it was, this guy's a difference maker. This guy is who we rely on. It's all the things that you already had a preconceived notion about with Jalen. And 2, he's going to be able to play a couple of different roles for you. So I think he's going to get a lot of playing time, specifically because you're going to have him as a chess piece eventually, not initially as a rookie, because that would not pay dividends for anybody. It's ridiculous to do that to a rookie, and they all understand that. They verbalize that. But I do believe that if you were going to put your money on anybody to be trotting out there other than Michael Penix Jr., okay, I think it could be Jalen Walker.
Fair enough. What about you, Free? Who's that rookie that you feel is either going to have a starting position, or I'll even give you just a little bit of kind of flexibility to say starting level snaps in game one?
Yeah, I mean, if I was betting on any of this draft class or last year's draft class, besides Michael Penix,
sorry, Michael Penix.
Look, no shade, Maria. You took the low hanging fruit, so enjoy.
No, you know why I did that? I'll tell you really fast. So the other day, I saw a lower third across the television that said Kirk Cousins not expected to start in 2025, and I was like, come on. That's why I said that. I was like, oh, so maybe I should clarify that Michael Penix Jr. is the quarterback, because what?
Maria, did you time travel to January or something like that?
Okay. I had to rub my eyes. I was like, what is going on? Anyway,
the national media, when it comes to professional Atlanta sports teams, is just dumbfounded.
They don't pay attention. It's okay.
At all. Not on the radar.
And I tried not to cuss then, so that's why I called.
But if I was betting on, if we're betting on who's most likely to play 60 snaps other than Michael Penix in that week 1 game, I would probably bet on Xavier Watts to be that guy, because I think, as Maria said, and others like Jalen Walker, James Pierce, they're going to be part of a rotation. And the edge room is much deeper today than it was, last year and whatnot. But I think if any of these rookies is going to play, and the same thing applies to last year's D-line picks, where, again, they're going to be part of rotation playing 20, 30, 40 snaps or whatever. But if anybody's going to play 60 snaps, I think Xavier Watts, being that second safety opposite Jesse Bates, would probably be the player that I would bet the most money on. And so, I think he'll be an interesting part of that mix to try to keep, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and those guys, contain Emeka Egbuka, all these weapons that the Bucs have at the receiver position in sort of contained. And I think he'll be a guy that needs to hit the ground running in order to have those contributions. Because when you look at the rest of the Falcon safety room, Jordan Fuller is a solid veteran player, but he's not, he's like a guy that's a good, solid all-around safety, but not a guy that is a plus guy, particularly when it comes to coverage. We know DeMarco Helms, that's not really his role. Billy Bowman's another guy that's probably going to be more of a nickel guy. And so I think when it comes to the back-end coverage, Xavier Watts is going to do potentially have a huge impact on this Falcons defense's ability to keep a lid on some of these high-powered offenses.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
For me, though, I have to go with Billy Bowman. I just look at the track, right? Who do you have to beat out? Who are you competing for snaps with? And when I think of D. Alford, that's not someone that, I feel like they'll be hard to beat because of the type of season that he had, last year. We know he had a down year. The Falcons only gave him a 1-year deal for a reason, right? So I think there was more of an insurance plan. Like, okay, we hit on this guy, Billy Bowman. We won't have to worry about trying to figure out what we're going to pay D Alford. So for me, I look at that. And then you got a guy like Clark Phillips moving down inside as well. He's making that transition from outside to inside. So there's going to be a learning curve there for him, I feel. So, and I just think Billy Bowman is just a perfect fit for this spot too, because he's transitioning from safety to corner, right? He played some nickel, in college as well. And we all know what he did down at the Senior Bowl. So he showed well down there as well. So for me, I feel like it's Billy because I like what I see from him on film. Like, he's a very scrappy guy. And there's used to be a group of corners that I played with in college. They used to call themselves the Scrappy Dogs. Like, and he's just speaks to that, because you're going to talk some trash. Like, you come down there, you mess with these dogs. They might not be the biggest ones, but they're going to run together. They're going to run in packs, and they're going to be ready to go out there and compete. So I feel like he's the epitome of that, on tape. So I think Billy Bowman is that guy for me that if I use a gambling reference like Aaron, I'm putting a little change, as my dad used to say. I put a little change on Billy Bowman to get a lot of snaps on against the Buccaneers.
Yeah, he was actually my choice too, because in my mind I was thinking, who gonna check me, Boo? And Boo meaning Chris Godwin. So whoever the hell is going to check Chris Godwin is the guy that I feel like needs to start, because he is expected to play. The Buccaneers are optimistic that he'll be able to return for game 1 of the regular season. 9 touchdowns across his career against the Falcons, and no lower than an average of 11 yards per catch against the Falcons. So yeah, somebody somewhere has to stop Chris Godwin, and that probably is the guy I'm looking to get the starting spot for September 7th. Now, how do the Falcons make a top 10 ranking pay dividends? We'll unpack that in Next Up. So, Aaron, according to Pro Football Focus, there were only 2 teams who had their offensive lines ranked in the top 10 of both pass blocking and run blocking grades in 2024. The Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles, and the Atlanta Falcons. So, what does this Falcons O-line have to do, not just to be considered one of the best in the league, but I'm talking about a top 10 that gives you results, not saying Super Bowl champion results, but at least if you get the ranking, you're doing something that puts this team back in the postseason.
Well, I think when we're talking about, these rankings and the recognition, as we do in list season, ultimately the Falcons will get the respect and recognition that they deserve by playing meaningful games in January. And so I think when you're asking sort of, what this offensive line has to do in order to get the team to that point, I think a lot of it has to be, running the football. That when we look at what this offense needs to do early in the season, being able to put up points to try to probably win some shootouts against some of these, higher powered offenses that they're going to face, as we've discussed on previous shows this summer, where it's like, there's a real chance that, without a massive improvement from this Falcons defense, that they're going to have to drop 30 burgers every single week for like the first month of the season in order to win games. And I think a big part of their ability to be that efficient and effective on offense is going to be able to run the football. And we're not just, hey, get your 110 yards or whatever that, a lot of NFL teams do. Like, no, we need 180. We need 200 plus sorts of games for this run game in order for us to, what we've seen from the Falcons at various points over the last couple of years with this offensive line, sort of dominating teams on the ground. That's what the Philadelphia Eagles did, where basically, Saquon Barkley, you give him 4 yards, he's going to take 40 out of that. And that's what you want to see from this Falcons offense and their offensive line, where we can give Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier 4 yards with the blocking, and then they can take care of the rest with, Bijan's cutting ability and with, Tyler Algier just being a bulldozer, and I'm just going to run over every stinking person. Divine Diablo still having nightmares about some of the trucks he had in that Raiders game last year from Tyler Algier trying to tackle him. And then probably why he signed with the Falcons. Like, I don't want to tackle that guy anymore. So I'm here in Atlanta. So I think that's really what, this offensive line needs to do. Like, they need to really spearhead so that we're sitting here a month into the season being like, who has the best running game in the NFL? It's the Atlanta Falcons. And I think this offensive line has the capability of doing that. They just got to deliver.
And maybe, Aaron, taking advantage of some of the weaknesses across that first 6 weeks, because I think for me, that's the big part, Jarvis. Like, hey, it's great to be ranked in the top 10 for your offensive line, but if you're not doing something in the ballpark of the other team that was ranked in the top 10, both with rushing protection and pass pro, then it's not a conversation I want to have, because then for me, it's just an empty ranking.
Absolutely. And when you think about, that's why, like, I went on a little a little semi rant on the X, because about, like stats, like statistics, like, okay, yeah, they were ranked in the top 10 and rushing and passing and all that stuff. I get that. That's cool. But guess what Kirk was doing all while that was going on? Turn the doggone football over a lot. He lost that Chargers game single-handedly. They didn't score a touchdown against the Saints in that first game, and Kirk was very, very, very open and honest about how he played to Raheem Morris in the little voice memo. I was like, oh my gosh. It's like, how could you? And this is the thing, right? When it comes to Kirk, I'm gonna get to the thing. Just follow me here, T. I know you're looking at me crazy, like, Jarvis, answer my question. But that's why I feel like it's hard for me to blame Kirk, for this whole situation. Like Free mentioned, I thought he made a great point, because the dude is just so honest He's very honest. Like, and
too honest. They got a tampering charge for it.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, yo, he had diarrhea of the mouth and they end up losing the 5th round pick.
He's an open book, baby. He is an open book.
So, like, whatever it is or how you feel about Kirk, he's going to tell the doggone truth. And that's all you can ask for when it comes to, especially your quarterback. But, those guys lie and they say, yeah, 100% better every day. They don't say anything. But Kirk, if you ask him, he's going to tell you the truth. So, but for me, I think it's a matter of Michael Penix being able to do what we talked about. My number's at 27 last time I checked. And then, I did a little research, T. I went back and look at how many points they averaged when he was the starter for those 3 games. 27 points. So, hey, you know what I'm saying? All you got to do is get them 27 points, baby. You know what I'm saying? Like, free, I know, 30 is going to be the goal against those teams. You know what I'm saying? And then they can level off. You know what I'm saying? They average 30 against the Bills. You're going to have to go 30 against those guys. Yeah. And then you kind of level off a little bit, and don't turn the ball over. I feel like everybody's going to be saying at the end of the year, because I feel if you do those things, they're going to be in the playoffs. And then once you get into the playoffs, like Free mentioned, that's when you start to get the notoriety. That's when the national pundits started saying, oh, man, this Michael Penix guy is actually pretty decent. Yeah, we saw that last year when y'all kept want to talk about Kirk Cousins and putting the camera on him during the game, those last few games, and saying, look at him with a dumb look on his face on the sideline. So, yeah, it was – so, yeah, for me, I think don't turn the football over. Make sure you average that 27, 28 points a game, because that's going to put you in the top 10 scoring in the league, and I think that the defense is just going to have to come along.
Yeah, Maria, I would agree with Jarvis. I think that, of course, the Falcons front office, sidelines, and players listen to the football party, so they are aware that they need to do the 27. Yeah, they need to produce the 27 points, just like Jarvis told them to do, just like they averaged in the last 3 games last year. So we know that
they got burner accounts on YouTube and on X.
Of course. And we thank you. Yeah. We thank you for being one of our everydayers, if you will. But Maria, that said, kind of what are you looking for? Because again, and that takes nothing away, by the way, from the accomplishment of being one of the better O-lines on the rush side, on the pass side. That's great. But again, those other guys hoisted a Lombardi. So what do we need to see from this O-line and how it impacts this offense in order to just be having a conversation on this football party at the end of the season about a postseason?
I'm with Aaron here in that I don't think any aspect of the football team, regardless of who they are, is going to get the recognition that I believe, and probably you guys as well, deserve unless they're playing playoff games. I mean, we talk about Bijan Robinson being one of the best running backs in the NFL, and national media doesn't ignore him. But at the same time, he's still not in the same breath as some of the Saquon Barkleys of the world because he's not playing in playoff games. And that's how it's going to be until the Falcons can get over that hump. And I think this is the year they do it. I thought last year was, but I'm still going to double down and say I believe that this year is. And then they're going to start being talked about as a real football team. I talk about for the longest time that Caden Ellis is by far and large one of the best defenders in the NFL. He's never going to get the recognition that he deserves because he is literally like hiding on the Falcons defense, a defense that collectively we talk about being so terrible year in and year out. So for the offensive line, one of the biggest things that makes them great, stats are fun and love it, and it gets guys paid and all that's important. And especially for the guys up front, stats are their friend. Like what they're doing to the normal person isn't as sexy as when you look at like a skill player or somebody that's, a pick six. So they're doing a brunt of the work and they don't get enough credit. But for them, this is an offensive line that's so consistent in terms of the guys that are together. This is the first time in 2 years we're going to see a new face starting on the offensive line at center. You have the highest graded, you want to continue with grades, guards in the NFL on your offensive line in Chris Lindstrom. So that part is all great and it's fun, but I think running the football is a big thing. Bijan Robinson talks consistently about wanting to have a Saquon Barkley type year. Yeah. He's going to do that with the help of his offensive line. And this offensive line is really good at being able to protect for the run game. Stretch play was the Falcons' bread and butter last year. Go back and watch the film. They relied so heavily on that. game in and game out. And when you have at your fingertips 2 running backs that are out of this world, which you're not going to have the luxury of that for much longer. So you have Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier on your team together. Utilize that to your advantage. Offensive line's got to help them get there, though.
Yeah. And Free, I know you are one who is not that high on certain numbers and certain rankings anyway, because like we talked about on the Monday football party, who gives a flying flip about a 97 or a 92 for Drake London and Jesse Bates III, respectively? But it does make me think about that. Like it's I don't want to say an empty stat, but anyway, it made me think about what you said, which basically is sometimes those things are arbitrary. It's what you do on the field and the impact that they'll have.
Yeah, I mean, when you ask people who's got the best lines in football right now, they're going to say Philadelphia, and probably before like Frank Ragnow retired, they would have said Detroit.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
Why is that? Because they go out there and they assert their will on opposing teams in the month of January when everybody's watching. Yes. And you'll have the Greg Olsons and the Tony Romos doing the color commentary during the play. Like, oh, Chris Lindstrom's the best guard in the game. You know, Penei Sewell is all this, and Lane Johnson's still one of the best, all that stuff. Right. And that's what gets you. That's what matters, right? Like where you rank 2, 10, 20, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's your ability to assert your will on your opponent. And that's what really deserves and earns the accolades. And then you can rank them wherever you want. But all I know at the end of the day, Caleb McGarry is driving that defender, and Chris Lindstrom on that combo block are driving. You know, I saw it in the Chargers game with Morgan Fox. Probably why did he sign with the team? He's getting driven off the ball 10 yards down the field. Right. It's like, hey, you know, like that's what matters. And so like that's why I sit here and I, you know, rail against rankings, because it's like no one cares whether you're like no football game was ever won or lost because, hey, we're the second ranked team in the NFL or whatever. It's like, no, you got to go out there and execute, and you have to go out there and be physically dominant in the trenches on both sides of the ball, air it out, complete your passes, make your field goals, all these various things that football always boils down to day one. And no ranking in the history of the world has ever determined those things, you know, before the games actually get played.
Yeah, and the dominance that Free talked about on both sides of the ball in the trenches has to be complemented by the third unit. So do we get a bounce back in 2025 on special teams? We'll talk about it next. So Maria, let's talk special teams. Marquise Williams' unit, if we think about it, has been one of the most dependable units on this team. He, of course, was one of the holdovers from Arthur Smith's regime because of the work that special teams did. But we saw special teams take a little bit of a step back last season for the Falcons. How does that team, how does that unit get back to that level of play in 2025? What do you want to see?
Well, kicking was such a big part of that, right? And that was Younghoe Koo, who had been so consistent for so many years for the Falcons, then taking a step backwards, and then he was injured, and then you're having a guy off the street come in and kick footballs for you. You know, it was the perfect storm of taking a step back in that direction. And think about how many games are won or lost for the Falcons by special teams. And it happens a lot. And it's not like it's all on their shoulders, but Marquise Williams does a phenomenal job of being able to put those guys in a situation where they can win you a football game and they can get that extra added, whether it be a field goal or an extra point or whatever at the end of the game to allow you to go and win. So he is as consistent as it gets. It's the reason why he's asked to be a coach throughout the year, you know? And I think that for Marquise Williams, continue to be creative. We saw him be creative on special teams last year. Take the kicking elements out of it. His creative ability, I think, is second to none in the NFL. So continue that, and I think the Falcons will be just fine.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think, Maria, you hit on it, because when you look back at the Falcons season in 2024, and you think about some of the games that they lost, some of those nail biters, some of them that really just made you, kind of made you feel some type of way, because let's just be honest, we weren't used to seeing that version of Younghoe Koo. So you look at a game like, just take any game, but of course, I'm thinking about the Saints game as well. Like that one probably is the one that really, really made people want to go play in traffic, because it's just not anything Jarvis. Is one of those.
Get him out of here.
Jarvis,
out of here. Get him out of here.
So right. It was so bad. I was home, as I always am, for homecoming for Xavier last season. And I had 3 different people ask me, hey, do you want to go to the game? And I was like, yeah, no, thanks, because the Falcons are going to destroy the Saints. And I am not a Saints fan, but it is no fun being in the dome when the Saints get destroyed. So I said, no, thank you. I literally sat at brunch and just kept waiting. Oh, I'm sure Cool will kick him out of this. Oh, I'm sure Cool kick their way out of this. Cool. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, snap. He ain't kicking them out of this one this time, of course. And we know what Kirk Cousins did too. But yeah, Jarvis, it was one of those games where I just have to say, like you, I mean, Falcons fans, because I did actually go down for the second line afterwards, but Falcons fans were like, just to see that fan base and to hear nothing from them. It was dead silence from the Falcons fans in New Orleans that weekend, because they were like, what the heck did we just witness?
And I believe that's why the special team unit has to get back to business, right? Because and then there was a one shining bright spot, last year, Cardale Hodge making the Pro Bowl as a special team. That was I have to acknowledge that, because he basically won a game for you, with this play. So and that was, and that's one of those things where you look at it and say, okay, we know that Marquise has the ability to get those guys back to where they need to be. That's why I'm excited about the Lenny Craig signing. I mean, I have no issues against Younghoe Koo. I just go off of what I see, and I saw that it was time for him to go last year, and and I never think that guy should get that guarantee that they're going to be the guy coming back after having a season like that. So I think, with the Lenny Craig piece, and I think that the return game has to be on the uptick as well, because we were like 24th, I believe, as far as kickoff return, and then punt return, they were like middle of the pack as well. So those things have to go up. Okay, how do they get those things up? They bring in Jamal Agnew. Can he be that guy, right? The 2023, he was pretty solid in the punt return game. He averaged about 10 yards a pop. That's all you ask for when it comes to punt return, right? Like, can you save me having to give them an extra first down? And if you average 10 yards of return, hey, that's one first down that you don't have to worry about. So I think that if Agnew comes in and does what he's supposed to do, and they get that kicker position solidified, whoever it is, it could be Craig, it could be Koo, as long as it's a real competition, and I believe that it's going to be, I feel like Marquise can get this team back to where it needs to be, because that has been a special teams period for the Falcons probably for the past 10, 15. Keith Armstrong was a hell of a special team coach as well. So it's been a tradition of, hey, man, special teams, we never have to worry about that. The offense might suck. The defense probably going to suck. But that special team is going to be pretty solid. So, yeah, it's time to get back to that. And I feel like they have the pieces in place to do that.
Yeah, agreed. So when you think about it, Free, you look at special teams, and I think Jarvis makes a great point. I love to say, we don't talk about Marquise enough. Well, sometimes it's one of those that we don't talk about it because it's just a given that special teams was going to be good until they weren't. So how do they get back to actually not being a part of the conversation because they're that good?
Yeah, I think, the Maria nailed it. It's the kicking game that we all notice, right? Because when you look at the rest of the special teams, it wasn't great by any means, besides Kadero Hodge, but Bradley Pinion was solid. The return game was fine. There's room for it to grow and whatnot. But when we look at the disappointment of the special teams last year, it was the kicking game. And, we talk about how special teams wins and loses games. We focus on Koo's struggles in that second Saints game, but we don't talk about Koo arguably kind of won you the first Saints game, right? He kicked 4 field goals, 250-plus yarders, including a career-long 58-yarder. You had the Kadero Hodge touchdown on the fumble recovery, in addition to, the Troy Anderson pick six. Like, defense and special teams, won you that game against the Saints, where the offense was really going through the struggles, as, Jarvis pointed out earlier, and Kirk talked about in the quarterback documentary that led to that voice memo with Raheem Morris, and basically saying, hey, I'm not doing my job. But like that's the funny thing about the season. Like, we remember the struggles of Koo, obviously, because the expectation with kickers and special teams is you have to be perfect, right? If Liam McCullough botches a snap, he gonna be gone, right? Like that's like you have to bat 1,000 as a long snapper, right? If you botch a hold, you have to bat 1,000. And while we know it's not realistic for kickers to bat 1,000 and make every kick, the expectation with Younghoe Koo and the performance that he has set over the last 5+ years that he's been in Atlanta, that he gonna make 90% of his field goals, 88% of his field goals. And so we did not see that this past year. But for most of the first half of the season, he was on that track, and then things derailed, and it goes back to, I think, the injuries that contributed to that and all the things with his kicking stance. And so hopefully he gets all that stuff figured out and we can get back to where we were in September, where we were talking about special teams as a strength of this football team, and it legitimately was, particularly coming off of that Saints game. And I think that is certainly something that is in there. We just got to see if, Koo gets back to being Koo, and if not, then it's going to be Lenny Krieg's job to set that standard, or somebody else's job to set that standard. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Whoever's going to be that guy, should the Falcons have a 27 to, or we'll say they're down 27-25, Jarvis, and they need to get to Jarvis's 27 or more, there's going to be a guy who's going to kick that field goal, and we can feel confident about that. Or Maria, you look at Michael Penix Jr. and just having the opportunity for the field to be flipped in his favor. I think that could be a beautiful thing. But Maria, I'll start with you as we wrap up, because this was something that you had mentioned, kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, about Bijan Robinson being one of those guys who actually does get his just due from the national media and NFL Network analysts. And of course, great NFL running back Maurice Jones-Drew kind of came out with his top 5 and said that Bijan is right there with the rest of those. Josh Jacobs at number 5, Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry. I'm sorry, at 4, because Bijan was 5. Then there's Josh Jacobs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry, and of course, Saquon Barkley at the top of the list. So my question to you guys real quick is this: what does Bijan Robinson have to do for you guys for him to catapult, maybe not at the top of the list, but catapult higher in that list? Because think about it. 3 of these guys, Maria, have gone on to deep postseason success. And of course, Saquon Barkley, an actual Super Bowl win. What does that look like for Bijan to be higher in the conversation, because the Falcons are higher in their ascent in the postseason?
Ultimately, your legend is created in the postseason, and these guys have not had the opportunity to have their legend be heard yet. And I think that opportunity is coming for Bijan. I think, again, the Falcons are going to make the postseason, and it needs to be Bijan's show. And that's when he becomes a next level running back. He can make Pro Bowls. We could talk about him being, what is it that the NFL Network does, the angry runner of the week or whatever. They get the scepter. Like, he can do, Tyler Algier gets that a lot. He can do all those things, and all those things are great. But I think the legend of Bijan is only going to grow once he starts making the postseason. This is a next level player, a once in a generation player. I remember when he went as high as he did, and people were like, wait a second, he's a running back. You really want to take him that high? And everyone was like, yes, he is unbelievable. And he's just so good at everything he does. So it's not surprising to me when he's in the same breath as these guys, but for him to really be respected and remembered, that's got to be created in a postseason.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's you got to see him in January, where he's clearly the best player on the field. We've seen that with Saquon Barkley. We saw that with Derrick Henry. We've seen that with Jahmyr Gibbs at various points, where this is the most electrifying player. And we know Bijan has that capability of being that type of player. So I think ultimately for him to get the sort of recognition that we all recognize, and Maria says, like, people were questioning the pick. And, the running joke I had, where it's like, there's 2 types of people in this world. There's Bijan Robinson fans and people who have not seen him play football yet. And I think that still exists in this planet. It's like basically everybody who sits down and watches this guy play football are like, oh, I get it now, and so it just takes just a couple of plays. And that's the type of electrifying ability that he has. And, he'll get that recognition as, the best running back or top 3 running back, whatever you want to put on it, because everybody that hasn't been able to watch him during the regular season will be able to get to watch him in January.
I think that he gets into the conversation of the top 3. So let's say that, because it's always those small little things that get you from like really, 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 really good to great, So I think that he's going to need help from Michael Penix, right? Because I feel Michael Penix, the arm strength and everything, push the ball down the field. Yep, I get it. Totally understand. But if it's not there, it's okay to take a check down to 7. If a check down to 7 can do a lot better for you than trying to find 8 over the middle, I feel, or Charlie Warner, something to that effect. So I feel like as long as Michael Penix just take what the defense gives him, in those moments, especially once this offense gets rolling. Once this offense gets rolling, that means the book's going to be out on you. So the teams are going to start doing certain things to what you're doing. And I think counters to that can be, hey, let's just get the ball in 7's hand. If they're covered, if 5 is covered and 8 is covered and 1 is not open on that backside, cool. Let me go to 7 and let's see what he can do. And I think those are going to be those little minute kind of adjustments is going to be the thing that kind of gets him over the top into that conversation about being one of the better running backs in the league.
Indeed. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. Check out Maria Martin, host of Sports Extra on Sundays on 11 Alive. And you can catch Jarvis as a frequent contributor for Locked On Falcons and Sports Extra. See you next time.